Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everyone, as you're all just filing in, running in. We are so excited to have you here. We're going to be starting here in a couple of minutes. We would love for you to say hello in the chat and let us know where you are zooming in from, what part of the world you are in. So excited to have you here. We're going to be starting the presentation in a couple of minutes. And why don't you let us know on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being, I can't feel any more joyful. What is your joy level at? I would love to know. And don't be shy. It's okay if you're not feeling it, because by the end, you will
be feeling it.
Yes. All right. Susan, great to see you. Hello, Melissa in Salt Lake City. Your joy level's at a 7, I think. All right. I like it. Jessie says 10 when she sees Rob.
Oh, thank you, Jessie.
I don't want to assume. So if you're first joining us and you're filing in right now, you are at the presentation for tonight called Creating Joy Through Empathy with our joy superpower expert, Rob Volpe, the handsome gentleman here with us. So we'll wait for a few more people and get started. Hey, Charles in San Francisco and Kit in Portland. We got an 8. We got a 6. Janine from Florida. I'm from Florida. If you're wondering who this happy person is, I'm Shari Alyse. I am going to be your MC for the evening. I turn this into a club. So buckle up. You're in for a great evening or day wherever you are in the world. We're excited to have our expert tonight. I think, let me check out the time. I think we've got a good crowd going. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. Hi, Shari from windy Chicago. So welcome, as I said, to our presentation tonight on Creating Joy Through Empathy with Rob Volpe. My name is Shari Alyse, and I am your Year of Joy reporter. And what the heck does that mean? It means that I get the amazing opportunity to be able to chat with people like Rob and like so many of our other joy superpower experts. I am part of the team of a Year of Joy, and I'm super excited about that. I'm going to introduce to you here your co-creator of the Art and Science of Joy and Year of Joy, Debby Schlesinger-Hellman. It doesn't work. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm okay no matter how you pronounce it, as long as you don't forget to call on me. Welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. We're just super excited about how well this is going, our Year of Joy and all our wonderful joy experts. And today, of course, we have not only a joy expert, but a dear friend of mine. And if anyone here is from the insights industry, you know he's one of us. So we are really, really, really lucky. I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to go ahead and introduce, for those who don't know Rob, let me tell you a little bit about him. Rob is an astute observer of life and a master storyteller. And if you've ever sat with him for a meal or a drink, you know he's a really good storyteller. He brings empathy and compassion to the human experience. He is the CEO of Ignite 360. That's an insights organization. He leads a team of insights, strategy, and creative professionals, serving the world's leading brands across a range of industries, all types. He's the author of one of my favorite books, right behind me. Tell me more about that, Solving the Empathy Crisis Over One Conversation at a Time. As a thought leader in the role of empathy in marketing and the workplace, he is a contributor to the Entrepreneurs Leadership Network. He is frequently a speaker on a variety of topics, including empathy, at conferences, corporations, colleges, podcasts, and always with the media. He lives in San Francisco with his husband and 3 cats. And I would like to welcome Rob Volpe to our wonderful hour on empathy. Rob, welcome.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you so much. It's so great to be here. Thank you, Shari, And thank you, everybody, for joining today. Really glad you're here, whether it's live or you're watching this on a recording on demand after the fact. Want to spend some time today talking about empathy and joy and that pathway. But before we get into that, today is actually, it's February 22nd, and it's a special day because it's the anniversary of the 1-year anniversary of my book coming out. And so as this was also Empathy Super Week or Superpower Week, I thought let's combine this and have a bit of a celebration of the two things. And I just want to share a couple of photos from the past, from last year, and share a few thoughts. So yeah, these are some photos. This was one of the most meaningful things for me a year ago. As a first-time author, it was so nerve-wracking because you've created something, put a lot of effort into it, and you're just not sure how it's going to land. And then all of a sudden it lands, and it lands in a lot of places with a lot of people. And people start sharing photos of getting the book, it arriving, that it's on its way. They start sharing on social media. Some reading groups formed with some different companies, and it just meant so much to me. And so I just wanted to thank everybody for their engagement, their enthusiasm and excitement about the book. We've sold quite a few copies. Lots of it has happened. It's gone really well. We've got more work to do, though. And even pets are getting into the action here. Can never disagree with some cats and dogs and stuffed loved ones enjoying it. But the thing that we need your help with is, and this is a book thing, and I know Jessie Finkelstein, who's my publisher from Page 2, is here. She can even add more info in the chat. But reviews and ratings are so critical, and especially getting over 100 is like this magic number. And you can see I did this screenshot today where there's 48 ratings and 14 reviews on Amazon or on Goodreads, and then 38 ratings on Amazon. We need that combined number to get over 100 so that it starts to unlock some additional promotion and awareness of the book. So my big ask from you and anybody you know that has the book is, if they have not reviewed it or rated it yet, to please do so on either Goodreads or on Amazon. It makes a huge help. So that's my big ask as we're trying to continue the journey and get the word out. The other thing I wanted to share, as I'll stop sharing my screen from now, just saying a thank you to everybody from Page 2 that helped bring the book to light and get the book out into the world, and continuing to do that and managing inventory and shipping and all the fun things. But also to the team at Arcbound, who's been doing a lot of the social media and content generation. I have a newsletter that we started a few weeks ago, and I've got a link later on to share for sign up for that. And also Lisa McGilvery, a good friend of mine who's been helping with PR. Together between Arcbound and Lisa and the publicist team, Maddie at Page 2, I've been on over 70 podcasts in the past year, had several TV placements, TV appearances, and more to come, and also been on radio and then newspaper and magazines. And all of that's so critical because it's getting the word out about the book, and the idea of empathy, and the reaction people have been having has been really positive. They're interested, they want to learn more. So I think about it as one conversation at a time, and trying to get the word out through that. And really excited here to be talking as it relates to the Year of Joy and how all of those things come together. So Debbie, do we want to talk for a minute about empathy and joy?
Well, thanks, Rob. No, I was going to ask a question, I guess, to everyone to think about for later on when we can engage together. Why is empathy so important in order to help us build joy? And I think that's like the big overarching question for all of us. We want to build our joy. Our whole premise, Andrew and myself, creating this Year of Joy, the whole idea here is, how do we help each other to become more joyful and live a better life and have a better world to live in? And that was our whole premise when we decided to build this. So when we talked to a number of people and found our research, one of the things we found was empathy was so important that we all learn how to be more empathetic, not only to others, but to ourselves, so that we could help build that joy. So I'm going to leave that question out for everyone. We can talk about that later when we open up for everyone to speak. And I thought maybe, Rob, you might take that and run with that.
I can definitely grab that baton and keep running, Debbie. Thank you. And yeah, it's so critical. There's so many barriers, I think, to joy, and empathy is definitely one of them. And so what I'm going to be sharing now is from the presentations that I give at different organizations, corporations, when they bring me in to talk about empathy and give some training. It's shortened up for time, but I thought everybody would get something out of that. And then, yeah, we can talk about how this all links into empathy. Feel free to put questions either in the chat or in the question Q&A space. We will definitely get to those at the end if I don't happen to catch it and address it while we're going through, but I'm going to have my screen share and presentation going. So without further ado, let's dive in. So this is really about creating joy through empathy, and how do we do that? One of the things when I talk about empathy, I often talk about it as this E word that people are afraid of. It's something where there is just this discomfort that people have, kind of like the folks here watching a horror or a scary movie in a movie theater. And it's an E word because another word that people get afraid of that's related to this is emotion. And empathy and emotion are actually tied to each other, but they are things that people get confused by, that they don't always understand, don't understand how to process, how to express it. Empathy and emotion are very similar in that regard. And there's a lot of confusion around what empathy actually is. And oftentimes I will ask, when I'm giving a talk about empathy, I'll ask the audience, give me definitions of empathy. And you guys can even put it into the chat right now. The first things that come to mind when you think about empathy. And I'm not going to look at the chat, but I'm willing to bet somebody out there is typing, it's understanding the feelings or feeling the feelings of somebody else as they're feeling them. And somebody else is probably thinking, oh yeah, it's like understanding the point of view of another person. And yet another person is going to type in, oh, it's walking a mile in somebody else's shoes. All of those things are correct. All of those are empathy. And that's part of where the confusion comes in. Common definition of empathy is connecting with another's perspective or emotions as if you were them. And then the colloquial is more to walk a mile in someone else's shoes as them. So when you just look at that phrase and that idea of the perspectives and the emotions, you can see those are two different things. It's very different to take on somebody else's perspective or their point of view compared to when you are trying to understand the emotions and the feelings. And some of this goes into and feeds the misunderstandings that so many people have about empathy. And that's one of the things that I try to do is demystify empathy, because once you understand it better and understand what it is and how, then you can figure out how to get there, and you can start to practice that in your own life. I also do a survey before a lot of talks that I give, and I ask people this define empathy. And this was one that came up not too long ago, and I just love it. So I've decided to keep using it because this is a great representation of empathy, which is empathy is a tiny version of the other person inside my brain that I can ask, how does this person feel about this topic? And it goes to show the self-awareness that we need, the questioning that we have to have when we're trying to get to empathy. And I just love the visual representation of this. So I've added this to my slide. Some data that's available about empathy, and I'll link share how this all links back into joy and into the world that we live in. But one of the things the studies have been finding is that empathy is critical in customer service. So 97% of customers say empathy is the most important element in customer engagement. And you don't have to work in research to know that 97% is pretty much everybody. Empathy is the most important element in customer engagement. So they are looking, whenever you're interacting with another business or another person, you're looking for empathy to come back. Do you see me? Do you hear me? Am I feeling supported and understood? Additionally, 90% of consumers want brands to show empathy through their behavior. So if when you think brand, think business, think service, company, the way organization, are they showing empathy through their behavior? It's not just talking the talk, because empathy is a bit of a buzzword now in leadership circles, but how are you actually behaving in an empathetic way? And then 86% of customers say empathy is the biggest driver of loyalty. So if a company is showing loyalty to me or showing empathy to me, I will show loyalty back to them. These are really, really high numbers. And what this reflects to me is that people are wanting that connection. They want the companies that they work with, the organizations they work with, to show that they understand me and that they get me. And I believe that the same is true, and we have some data that shows this very similar is true with our human interactions with all the people that we meet with, because behind every company and organization are people. And yet there's this tension in being empathetic. And this data comes from the Business Solver State of Workplace Empathy Study. It comes out every year. This is data from last year's study. And it's focused on the CEO, but I believe that this holds true for anybody that's at any level within an organization. And the first piece of data is that 69% of CEOs recognize it's their job to build empathy in the workplace. So they're recognizing that, okay, yeah, I'm the leader of the company, 2/3, almost 3/4. I got to do something about this. This is my responsibility. And yet nearly 80% of CEOs say they struggle to be empathetic themselves. So they're supposed to do something, but they aren't practicing it necessarily themselves. So are they practicing what they're supposed to be preaching? Go back to the other slide about people wanting that empathy and that feedback, and that showing empathy, and that drives loyalty. And 77% of CEOs worry they'll lose respect if they're seen as too empathetic. So you can see here, it's like, okay, the CEOs recognize, leaders recognize, like, yeah, I need to build the empathy in the workplace, but I'm not really sure about my own skills, and I'm worried about how I'm going to be seen if I'm too empathetic. And I believe this actually is reflective of what's happening in society in general. People recognize we need it, we've got to be empathetic, but I don't really know how to do it, and I'm not really sure how other people are going to see me if I am empathetic, and what does that actually mean? So we're going to break some of that down over the rest of this presentation, and hopefully it'll make some more sense. Absolutely love this quote from Maya Angelou. It's in the book, and I use it all the time in talks and in other places. I think we all have empathy. We may not have enough courage to display it. And that's really so part and parcel to this. It is a choice on how we want to see the world, similar to getting to joy. Not all of us wake up with joy in our hearts and feeling and joyful. And even as we were saying at the very beginning, when people were putting in what their joy number was for today, it really depends on so many different things and situations, but we have to have the courage to chase after it. We need to be courageous to try to be empathetic. And that through that, by pushing through that, we'll be able to get to more joy. So I'm going to take you through 6 facts and 5 steps to empathy. Fact number 1, humans are hardwired for empathy. This is something that we are born with. Neurobiologically based, it's a competency. It's not just a soft skill. It's not something like math that we just learn. It's an actual thing. Neuroscientists, including Helen Reese at Harvard and Jamil Zaki at Stanford here in California, have found the parts of our brain that light up when we are reflecting empathy, both cognitive and emotional empathy. And I'll get into those differences in a minute. So this is something we're all born with. The trick here, though, is that are we giving ourselves opportunities to be empathetic and to practice the empathy muscle? So imagine a child being born. You've got the muscles baby has the muscles in its legs to crawl, to ultimately run, but it needs the opportunities. It needs to start by crawling. It needs to then get to standing and scooting along the sofa until ultimately it's able to run. Empathy works very similarly. We need to have those opportunities. We need to see other people role model for us how to be empathetic so that we can then start to actually develop those skills ourselves. Because if we're not practicing and using those muscles, they're going to atrophy just like the physical muscles in our body. Second fact, empathy is not sympathy. There's a lot of confusion around this as well. People conflate the two, and they're actually very, very distinct. The way I like to talk about the difference between the two, there's a framework someone else coined that sympathy is the ability to feel for a person, and it's a focus on that three-letter word for, where empathy is the ability to feel with a person, a four-letter word. Sympathy can create a power dynamic where you're starting to have pity for somebody else. And so while sympathy is something that we need in our society, and there are times and places for it, oftentimes what's more required is empathy in order to feel with somebody else and that level of equality. And if you want to go deeper and kind of, as I say, double click on this, just Google Brené Brown, empathy versus sympathy. There's a really great 5-minute animated video that she has about this, and it brings to light the differences between the two and where sympathy can get us in trouble. The next fact, there are two types of empathy, as I was alluding to earlier. And if you think about that definition of empathy is connecting with the emotions of somebody else, how somebody else is feeling, or their perspective. That's the clue in these different types of empathy. There's emotional empathy and cognitive empathy. Emotional empathy is feeling the emotions as another person is feeling them, where cognitive empathy is the perspective taking. I can see your point of view. I talk about emotional empathy as the thing that we might have with the people that are closest to us. So if you go back to cave dwelling times, it's the thing that we would have with the people that would live in our cave. That could be our family, our close friends, the people with very similar perspective, outlook, lived experiences, rituals, and beliefs. It's easier for us to understand where they're coming from and feel their feelings and how they might be feeling about something. Where cognitive empathy is what we use in the cave dwelling example with the people that live in the cave down the road. Don't really know them. They come over. They want to partner with us to clear all the trees out so we can try this new thing that they've developed called farming. And we don't totally understand what farming is all about, but we understand where they might be coming from. They're looking for an easier, more reliable way to provide for the people that live in their cave. I can cognitively understand that. I might personally have that love of hunting and gathering and want to continue with that, but I can see where they're coming from. And that understanding of where the other person is coming from is what's enabling us to then collaborate and to make decisions on what part of the field or area we're going to clear to make the field to do the farming. What trees do we need to hold on to? So there's two different types of empathy. We all have the ability to have both. It's cognitive empathy, though, that we use more often in our day-to-day life because, quite honestly, we're dealing and interacting with people from the different caves all the time. If you think about the people that you work with, the people that are in your neighborhood, at the stores that you shop at, the other service providers, this is all about cognitive empathy and perspective taking. And one of the beautiful things about empathy is that it empowers the skills that we need to be the people that we are and hope to become. So one of the things that is confusing for people about empathy is that, like, once I get empathy, like, is that it? Okay, now what do I do with it? But empathy actually is the fuel within those skills. It's that empowerment. So when you have empathy, you're going to be better at communicating, at collaborating, problem solving, decision making, persuading, ideation, building trust, reaching forgiveness, and even having compassion. Empathy fuels all of those things. And that, in turn, is what makes us great leaders, managers, team members, individual contributors, volunteers, friends, partners, parents, neighbors, family members, any role that we play in our lives. Empathy is fueling the skills that we need to excel at those particular roles. And if you think about the people that are in your life that you might look up to, chances are they are probably excelling at using empathy with you in one of those skills so that they're excelling in that role as it relates to you in your life. The challenge, though, is that there is an empathy crisis. At risk of adding one more crisis to all the crises that we face, there is this significant decline in empathy skills. And there's a lot of anecdotal evidence to it, but there's also empirical evidence. I start with a study that came out from the University of Michigan way back in 2010. They looked at student life surveys from 76 different universities, starting in 1979 all the way through 2009. They found between 1979 and 2001, there was a 40% decline in the ability to have empathy, to merely see the point of view of your classmates compared to the 1979 cohort that started. After 2001, the numbers stayed flat. It didn't move up. Unfortunately, it didn't go down. And the authors also tried to refresh the study in about 2016, and they still found no noticeable change that they were able to report. So think about that. If you were in college in 2001, that's 22 years ago now. So you're probably around 40 at this point. And it may not be you that has less empathy, but your peers certainly fall into that. And collectively, we're all having less empathy in the way that we're interacting with each other. Some more recent data that Ignite 360 found in our Navigating to a New Normal study, we asked US adults, there were 1,500 that were in this survey, to rank the different concerns, a level of concern they have on 25 different topics. And it was everything from personal pocketbook issues, which would be like food prices, gas prices, home energy prices, and your concerns about those, to societal issues, including climate change, the drug addiction issues, homelessness, women's reproductive health. What else was there? Terrorism, and then other issues around losing a job, losing your house. And we threw in we threw in the question. Sorry, we asked, like, and included in the list, how concerned were people about the inability to overcome differences of opinions? And 62% of US adults said they were worried about our inability to overcome differences of opinion. And empathy is what fuels that. And that 62%, that was number 4 on our list of 25 different criteria. So was a significant amount of concern. Interestingly enough, number 5 on our list of 25 was at 60%, was the inability or the political polarization of government and the inability of government to overcome that political polarization. Empathy is behind both of those things, and those eclipsed all of the societal issues that were there. So as I've been saying, our inability to solve the problem is actually starting to eclipse the problem itself. And that's the empathy crisis, and we need to do something about that, because some more data from Ignite 360, 1/3 of US adults aren't able to easily see another person's point of view. We asked the exact same question that the University of Michigan was looking at, but we posed it to adults, and nearly 1/3 of the people you're going to run into today aren't going to be able to easily see your point of view. And that's really concerning. And that's part of what I'm working on to help people understand how you can get to empathy, how to see another person's point of view. And I'll also take a moment and point out, too, that while we have an empathy crisis, there's also a wonderful group of people that are and would identify themselves as empaths or highly sensitive people. And they're like our empathy Olympians. They have that superpower. It is totally turned on. And for them, if you fall into that group, what you're really needing to focus on is how to set the boundaries for yourself so that you don't get overwhelmed by all of the empathy and the energy that you're taking in. How do you release that in the moment as you're hearing stories from people and feeling the things that you're feeling, but also after the fact? What's the self-care that you need to do? For some people, that's taking a walk in nature, and others it's playing with their kids or their pets. And still others, it's taking a bath or reading a great book. So understand for yourself how you show up, where you fit in that, so that you can tend to yourself so that you'll be ready for the next day and to help people through empathy. For all of us, though, there's 4 actions that are required to be empathetic. The first one is about self-awareness. This is mindfulness. This is that metacognition. It's understanding the thoughts that you're having. It's seeing the thoughts as they're coming up, being able to catch yourself and go, wait, where's that one coming from? And being willing and able to explore what's happening. So it's that cognition, that consciousness that exists in all of us beyond just the reactionary thoughts that we're having. The second one is courage, as I was talking about from Maya Angelou's quote. It really is. It does take courage to do this, to make the choice. It's so easy to just sit and be judgmental of other people, but you've got to be courageous to actually make the choice to try to do something different. And then you've got to practice, and it's practicing the 5 steps, which we're going to get into in a minute. And that takes patience and diligence. You've got to continue to repeat. It's that idea of practice making perfect. And finally, it's about having grace. Grace with yourself and grace with others. You're human. We are all human. We make mistakes. What's so important is that we've got the courage to try and to try to do better. And we make the attempt and we learn from it. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we don't. Those of you that have read the book know it is filled with stories around the 5 steps and my own experiences. And a lot of my own failures, and also the times that I've succeeded. But it's always about the lessons that I've learned and having that grace with yourself so that you can try and do better the next time. So those are the 4 actions we need in order to be empathetic. But the whole thing starts with a curious breath. It can be really difficult when you're trying to be empathetic with somebody. Sometimes you'll be in situations where people are punching your buttons unknowingly, but they're triggering something inside you, or you're hearing something that's coming out of left field. And so it's always important to just stop, take a curious breath, and then proceed down the 5 steps. So I wanted to just introduce that concept of take a curious breath. And so the 5 steps to empathy, I'll run through these quickly here, and then I've got some detail on those coming up. But 5 steps to empathy, the very first one is dismantle judgment. This is the one that gets in many people's way, particularly if you are educated, working in corporate America. We are taught to have opinions and be right and defend our opinion. And that leads us to being more judgmental than we probably should be. And it becomes a very reflexive action. The second step is to ask good questions. We often think that we are, but not always the case. And you want to be asking the good questions and then actively listening, the third step. It's about being present and paying attention to what's being said, both verbally and non-verbally, and what are the things that your intuition might be telling you. The fourth step is integrate into understanding. So this is making room in your head that there are other ways of viewing the world, and to be okay with that, to take that curious breath and be open to trying to understand and make room in your head that, hey, there are other people that move through the world differently. They have different ways of doing things, and that's okay. You want to be curious about it so that you can understand it, so that you can ultimately, in the fifth step, use solution imagination. And that's when you turn everything back on itself and you start to use what you're hearing and understanding to further the conversation. So whether you're communicating with somebody or you're collaborating together, using solution imagination is when you're taking the things that you're hearing and starting to apply those. So a little bit further into each of the 5 steps. So the first one is dismantling judgment. So you must take off your own shoes before you can put on another's. Steve Case, the CEO of Intuit, said it, and I loved that quote. When I heard him or read that he had said that, it's like, yeah, absolutely, because my size 12 shoes are going to make an even larger shoe that I need to step into. So better to take my shoes off. But our judgments are things that we unknowingly possess, and those things trigger us to spark assumptions that'll then misguide us. And that includes bias and stereotypes and past experiences. It's all the things that we're carrying with us. And we need that self-awareness, that metacognition, to understand and to catch ourselves in the moment as we're trying to be judgmental and go, whoa, wait a minute, where's that coming from? And how might I reframe this? And this is actually, I think, a very critical step, and we can talk about it after I get through this presentation. But I think this is a critical step because this is really a big barrier. In the book, I talk about it as this brick wall or like noise canceling headphones. And it's doing that in hindrance of your journey to joy. How can you get to joy when you can't even see it, you can't even hear it? You're being so judgmental towards other people, and where's the joy in that? So you want to try to dismantle your judgment, and that takes a lot of self-awareness. It takes practice and trying to correct yourself. And one of the activities on the Year of Joy website that we have for this week is a judgment journal. And in the judgment journal, you just make notes during the day of the times that you were judgmental about something, where you were trying to be judgmental. You were going to say something, or maybe you did say something that would have come across as being judgmental and might have prevented you from getting to empathy. And then the journal activity asks you to write down a different way that you might go about that. How might you have rephrased something? And what was that desired outcome? And then at the end, because I didn't want us all creating a bunch of burn books that were going to be used against us, you get to tear the page up and burn it or flush it down the toilet, because you can start fresh and you want to let those feelings and thoughts go. So that's dismantling judgment. First step, I think it's the biggest step for most of us. The second step, though, is asking good questions. And a lot of us think that we're asking good questions, if not great questions, particularly those of us in the insights industry. But the reality is we're asking leading questions, those closed questions that reassure us of our worldview. And I often think about the courtroom dramas where they say, objection, leading the witness. It's when you're asking somebody something to try to get them to reaffirm your own biases that you might have. Instead, you want to turn it around and ask broad exploratory questions. So an example of a broad exploratory question would be, what does it mean to be successful on the job? The nature of that question, the way that it's phrased, if I were to ask Shari that question, if I was to ask Debby that question, the answers that I would get would be very different and probably specific to who they are and the jobs that they're in and what's important to them. That's then helpful because I understand better where they're coming from, and I can either course correct if I feel like, well, actually, in this job, we feel this is more important. Or I can further the conversation to help them be even more successful. So you want to be asking these broad exploratory questions. Closed questions, as many of us researchers do need to ask, they do have their place, but not in initial exploratory conversation. One of the challenges that we've got in the Year of Joy site for this week is to actually remove the word why from your vocabulary. And this is actually harder than it seems. We use why constantly in our life. What we want to know is why. You really want to reframe it. Use who, what, where, when, and how. The reason why we don't want to use why is because from the time that we were children, and if you think about the children in your life, what's the question that they get asked a lot is why? Why did you draw on the marker and crayon? Why did you cut your sister's hair? Why? And that follows you. It follows you into school. It follows you into that part-time job you have as a teenager. It follows you into your work life. And it puts us on the defensive. So how are we going to be able to open up and really give a good quality answer if we're put on the defensive, and knowing that we need to rationalize and come up with a good excuse in order to not get in trouble. So you want to get rid of the word why from your vocabulary. And there's an activity on the Year of Joy site to help you actually do that and make a little game out of it with friends, family, or colleagues. The third step is to actively listen. So here, again, it's about making that conscious effort to stay focused. That means phones down. For those of you that are on your email or Facebook or whatever you're doing while you're also listening to this presentation, that's the question. Are you really focused on everything that I'm saying, and are you hearing everything? So you want to get rid of the distractions as much as you possibly can, because when you're doing things, other things, your brain actually cannot handle more than one focus point at a time. It is physically impossible for our brains to truly multitask. Instead, we're just switching back and forth. And the older we get, the easier it is to get more distracted and shifts our attention away. And then we're not really hearing somebody. But when we choose to listen and concentrate, we're going to hear a lot more than we ever thought possible. So you want to be listening, you want to pay attention. It's also about the nonverbal cues, the physical gestures, the movements, the things that are in somebody's surround. So my cats are being very quiet right now, but sometimes they love to engage and get up on here. That can end up being a distraction for me. And so for somebody that I'm talking to, for them to acknowledge, oh, is that one of your cats? What's going on? And then I can say, oh yeah, I actually need to feed them, let them out. Do you mind hanging on? That act of actually listening to me enables me to be more present. The other person's going to learn a lot more about me, and you're going to hear what's really happening. And it's going to build some trust and connection in our communication. So really important to actively listen. And next, we've got integrate into understanding. So this is about making space in your head for perspectives that don't align to your own. And this is one of those things. Remember that data I shared in the beginning about that large numbers, I think it was 78%, 76% of CEOs were worried that they were going to lose respect if they were shown as being empathetic. That's what a lot of integrate into understanding is. There's this fear of how we're going to be viewed, or that when we take on somebody else's point of view, that we're going to have to give up our own. And that is absolutely not the case. It's just making room in your head. You don't have to give up your own beliefs. There's always room for different perspectives and points of view. And by hearing those things, that's how you're able to use empathy to work together to solve problems and collaborate. So super, super important that you're integrating into understanding. There's a really fun activity on the Year of Joy site around ice cream and treats and things that we love that you can do with somebody else and use empathy, understanding each other and where each other is coming from, to try to decide on a favorite flavor of ice cream, or a flavor of ice cream that the two of you can agree on to go get at an ice cream store. And maybe you'll actually go do that in person, because God knows it's so warm outside in some parts of the country and freezing cold in others today and tomorrow. So finally, we're at use solution imagination. So this is when you're stepping into the other person's shoes as them. You're starting to turn things back on itself. It's being able to say, I can imagine how you feel, and using that to carry on the conversation. In the book, one of my favorite chapters, there's a story. We were doing a project up in Canada with recent immigrants and looking at how they had made that journey and adopting food and to life in Canada. And one of the people I was talking to was a couple from Asia. They had a preteen, a tween age son at that point. And the mom had worked as a teacher over in India, but of course her education credentials didn't transfer into Canada. So she ended up getting a job at Burger King. And she talked about how when she first started at Burger King, she was having to work the grill line. And she had earlier been talking about how they were Hindi and that the cow is a sacred animal, so a symbol in their religion, and so they don't eat beef. And so I'm hearing all of these things, and I'm trying to integrate all of this into my understanding. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. So she's working the grill line, making Whoppers, which are made of beef, which is a sacred symbol. What's that like? So I asked her, and the book reveals her answer and the conversation that we had, but it's an example of me using solution imagination. I was hearing the things that she was saying, I was integrating it into my understanding, and I was using it to further the conversation with her in that particular case. And you can use it to support other people or whatever it is that you're aiming to achieve. So it's that cognitive ability to express that other person's point of view and understand what's motivating that point of view. So in that case, I was able to say, well, wait a minute, you're Hindi and the cow and the symbol of your religion. And she instantly got what I was talking about, but I was connecting with all of those things with her and expressing it back. And if you can't reach that, something else is happening in those 4 steps, the first 4 steps. So you want to go back and revisit those. Just a couple more slides here. I wanted to share some words. People are often asking me, like, what are some phrases that I can use? How do I show empathy to other people? And the reality is you need to find the words that are good for you and that you're comfortable using. But here are some that other people use, and maybe these will be useful for you. One of them is, I can imagine how you feel, or I can see your point of view, or that must have been really fill in the blank. What I'm hearing you say is, or how are you doing with? I'd like to know your thoughts on something. I'm curious to understand, or well, tell me more about that. And then as you're reflecting these things, you want to use it to advance the situation. So you're taking those phrases, you're reflecting what you're hearing, and then you're furthering the conversation. So you might be advancing the situation by saying, how can I help, or how can I support you? Or let's solve this together. What I'm hearing from you is, or you can also ask for empathy yourself. So say, well, let me share where I'm coming from so you can see my perspective on this. And then you go ahead and you state your perspective to somebody else. So all of these things, and again, this is where the grace comes in. We don't always get it right. I don't always get it right. But what's important is that we're trying. So to sum up, the application of empathy is largely an intellectual cognitive exercise in most of the situations that we're running into. Keep in mind that there's 5 steps that you need to follow, and that empathy empowers. Getting to a place of empathy isn't the be-all, end-all. It's the secret ingredient that we need to be in a well-functioning society, and that it takes continual practice to keep the empathy skills strong and use empathy to reduce those obstacles to joy that you may be experiencing. Because you cannot be of service to your colleagues, your clients, or the community without empathy. So I ask all of you to please be courageous, to be empathetic every day. We're going to continue the conversation, but a few different QR codes and things for you guys to grab onto. On Ignite 360's website and the Ignition Engine, which is our training program, we actually have a free trial through the end of the month. So that's through next Wednesday for some online training that we're doing around empathy. So if you want to go a bit deeper, see how empathy plays out in some different areas, you can jump on there. And use that QR code. Would love to have you join my biweekly newsletter called Reading Between the Lines. That is a link to the subscribe page there. And if you generally want more information, the QR code over to the left is going to the book website, which is 5stepstoempathy.com. And of course, please follow me on all the socials. Just look for Empathy Activist or RM Volpe. I'll leave
Rob,
that up for a minute, but Debbie, that's
that was great. Oh my gosh, thank you. I think, well, I'm gonna put my real face up. The one that doesn't look so made up, sorry. That was great. I wanted to just point out to everyone the importance of empathy, as Rob stated, for joy. You know, it is that practice that you continue. As any of you have heard me speak, I talk about this joy muscle that we have to build. And in order to keep it healthy, we have to put that effort in all the time. It's really no less than building those ab muscles. And if you stop and you put it away for a while, we all know then when you go back to it, takes a little extra time. So the idea is to keep those things going on a regular basis to help build that joy and keep that joy going and that joy flowing. So that was just a wonderful presentation, Rob. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Any questions people have, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I would love to know some of, whether a question or even one of your biggest takeaways. Rob, I thought that was so powerful. I think something that you said while we're waiting for people to, if anyone wants to ask a question or share your takeaway, I think that something that's super important that you said is that people don't have to give up their own beliefs. And I think that was so powerful because what was percolating in my mind as you were sharing all of this is, why is it so hard for people to, see someone else's perspective, to be in that space? And what immediately came up for me was, well, because people fear that, they fear lots of things. So just to hear that perspective and that point, I think is so powerful, that they don't have to give up their own beliefs. You just got to hold space and be there with that person and understand. So good.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so true. And people get so hung up on, and there's a lot of different factors that have led into this in society, but we have to be right. It's got to be our way or the highway. It's very black and white versus and binary versus this more open, understanding, accepting sort of society. And we're also bumping into each other in ways that we never did 30, 40, 50 years ago because of technology, because of globalization, all the different things that are happening. And so it's even more important to keep an open mind and be open to how other people live and think and feel.
Absolutely.
I think I don't know if anyone here participated while we had our week of positive intelligence and with Natalie Siston, and she talked about how our brains are often wired to be in a survival mode. So survival mode would take us to the negative. That's how we're built naturally. And the more aware you are, which was Rob was talking about today, the more aware you are, self-aware, it gives you the opportunity to rewire to be in a more neutral or positive framework.
Yeah.
And I think when we even add that with the empathy, we're able to look at the world through a different lens and see perspectives that are not all aligned with ourselves. Because I don't know about any of you, but I know I am not right on everything. I want to be, but I'm not.
Oh, I was like, I am. No.
I was like, well,
No, it's so true, Debbie. That actually is what helped me to be empathetic with other people, or building that muscle. I remember years ago is I unintentionally hurt somebody's feelings, and it was so unintentional. And I remember like trying to apologize profusely and then realizing later on when someone else did that, if I knew that I was imperfect and I could do that, then I could extend that same when somebody else did it and be able to feel what they were going through as well. So it really shifted things.
Right. Let me give you a question from Susan, or Sue, as I call her. What barriers do you face when you're trying to communicate the importance of empathy? Meaning, are you talking to leaders or at a conference, you sense or you hear pushback, as in, why is this my job?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's, thank you, Sue, for dropping that one in. I think a lot of times, if I'm speaking at a conference, the people that are showing up are interested, and the organizations that are bringing me in are recognizing it. But it's like, okay, well, who isn't interested? And I think if you think about the sort of older school culture where they're not making that connection of empathy being so important, or understanding empathy, or just even getting that nuance, I think that's where there's a lot of challenge. And typically as with any training, it isn't just about like, okay, great, you've heard this presentation. And now what I would encourage everybody to do is go onto the Your Joy site and do the activities, because it's the bridge from the learning and the knowledge transfer to actually applying it. And that's just, there's so much inertia that ends up happening. So go take that next step, go a little deeper, read the book, go on to do the journaling activities that are on there, participate in the community. Those are all things that can help make that gap. So I would say that the people that aren't doing that, they're just, they're either wanting to pay it lip service or just are thinking, oh, this is a fad, it's going to go away. And the world has changed. This is not going away anytime soon.
Anybody else have any questions or want to share their takeaway from today? So powerful. I also love what you said about listening, just the act of listening. I know for myself, and personal joy is being fully present with somebody and feeling their full presence definitely is a joy igniter. We feel seen, we feel heard. So I know how it makes me feel. So I am sure that when I'm with somebody that I gift that same thing. So that active listening is like,
yeah, absolutely. I think, I talked about it earlier, but dismantling judgment, that being judgmental, it's like negative energy that's going out there. And that's the opposite of joy. And so if you can try to dismantle the judgment and see, be accepting of other people, be open, be curious, I think that opens the runway up to joy quite significantly for people.
Yeah. I have a question for you. Have you in this journey of writing this book and all the talks that you've been doing, have you seen a difference with empathy? Is it in your mind or?
The study of empathy is relatively new. Like that, when that study came out in 2010, there wasn't a lot of data that was out there, or there's so many different areas that people are studying, parents and kids. There's a good amount of empathy study that's happened around the role of parents raising their kids to be more empathetic. But around the general population, there hasn't been as much. I think what surprised me, what delights me is when I hear from people that have read the book or have heard me talk and then come back and say, oh my gosh, I was in this moment and I remembered a story from the book and I ended up doing something different. Whether I had one cousin tell me that it's just helped her not get angry with other drivers. And just because, who needs that? Who needs the blood pressure to go up? So that was one thing. A mom reached out that I'd never met before. She changed the way she and her 13-year-old son interact because he was having trouble in school. She, instead of saying why, she remembered the book and she just said, tell me more about that. Mm-hmm. And he in turn opened up in a way that she hadn't experienced. So she was able to really help him. So it gives me confidence that we can make this change. We just have to be courageous. So I think I've learned that about empathy, and we're just peeling the onion, and it'll all be good fodder for the next book.
Absolutely. I say we're in the same camp trying to change a little bit of how the world functions moving forward, because, and you said it before, there's a lot more technology now. There's a lot more access to a lot of things, whether they be something you agree with or not. And I think that puts us into different places than maybe in the 70s, or even the 80s, when there wasn't this access. So I think what happens is we have all this information and instantaneous information that may trigger. And triggers are a big thing. Mm-hmm. So learning to be empathetic and be able to take that breath, as you said, that curious breath, which I love the way you said that, I think will serve us all well. It's, how are we able to push that out to the masses? So I say I always say, and for those on here who have heard me, Andrew and I talk about joy, and we say, If it's one person at a time, it'll be one person at a time.
Exactly.
And eventually there'll be that ripple effect. And all of us here, you know, the whoever was on this call, if we all talk to one person, we've already made a difference.
Exactly. It's one conversation at a time, and it's spreading that out. And I just want to address, I saw there's another question in the Q&A around the impact of social media. And I'm not going to blame social media for all of our ills, although, you know, it's really been death by 1,000 cuts. And just think about when you're on social media and you're engaging in social media, are you offering sympathy for somebody? Are you offering empathy? And can you offer empathy? And sometimes you just need to pick up the phone and call somebody and check in and, hey, how are you doing? I saw your post that's really, you know, upsetting or difficult. How can I support you? You know, and that's in a sort of sympathetic sort of situation or scenario. But I mean, technology, the screens that are around us, as well as then what we're doing on those screens, that's contributed to it. Reality shows, a lot of programming that's been coming at us for decades now. That's all winner takes all. Who's the survivor? That's, you know, there's no empathy there. It's a gameplay to undercut your component or your opponents. So, you know, it's like, well, what are the positives? Where do you see that community forming? You know, and that's what's been fascinating to see the acceptance and embrace of reality shows like the Great British Bake Off or RuPaul's Drag Race, where there's this real feeling of support. They care about each other. They're supporting each other, even though they're in competition to get to the end, that they do care. So, you know, it's then making the decisions on where you're going to make adjustments in your own life. So I never advocate to get off of social media completely, but maybe manage your relationship a little bit differently. Do things like that.
Well, I'm trying to make a personal difference in reality TV with positive, impactful stuff. So
exactly.
Stay tuned. But we at the Year of Joy are so deeply appreciative of you, Rob, and the work that you're doing in the world with empathy. And I just want to say that with your book, tell me more about that. When I first heard it, just as I think it was a mother that you said or something, like that just made me exhale. And I'll say that because I think sometimes we don't know what to say, or if it's a difference of opinions, we feel that pushback from that instead of just that simple, beautiful question. And so I just want to encourage everybody to grab your book, to leave a review, to sign up for your newsletter, to congratulate Rob on his 1-year anniversary
Yay.
of the book. Yay!
Thank you.
Yes. And if you have not signed up, if you're brand new here for the Year of Joy, maybe Debbie, you want to say a few words about the Year
Yes,
of Joy?
We'd love to have you join our community. We have wonderful experts just like Rob. Every week, a new expert informing us, teaching us, educating us, giving us tools and tips. And the platform is very user-friendly. And all of the activities and all of these events will be stored on there. We have a library. So we welcome you, not only for you yourself to join if you haven't already, but to please share that with your community, your friends, your family, your coworkers. It is a free online platform for a year for you to be able to build joy, build that joy muscle. We are offering this for free. All of our joy experts are doing the same. This is something that we are hoping will make the world a better place.
And thank you for taking that on. No small feat.
You know, you say it out loud, you just have to then go do it.
Exactly. Amen.
Yes. Rob, did you want to say any final words or anything?
Just a huge thank you to everybody that was here today and that's taken the time to watch asynchronously. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate the support. And just to please be courageous, to be empathetic. And I look forward to connecting with everybody on all the other Year of Joy platforms, social media, all the places.
Thank you all for attending. And we hope we'll see you on our Year of Joy platform. Thanks, Rob. Thank you, Shari.
Thank you, Debbie. Bye, everyone.